And here we go. We're live.
Why do you make me look so small?
You look because I don't have a producer. So we are live. It's Happy Wednesday. It's Wednesday, March 28th, and I am really honored to have David Siegel and Pete Crotty here with me to talk about a very serious issue, the opioid epidemic and crisis. We also have David's beautiful wife and her sister here. See, I got it in. Jackie Siegel is here in the audience, and we're here today to really talk about something that you see it all over the news. And Mr. Siegel, Mr. and Mrs. Siegel obviously had a very tragic event happen in their life, and I think that they're going to talk about that today. And then Pete Crotty is here to talk about his perception or his perspective on that. So obviously you guys can hear us because I'm getting thumbs up. I'm trying it today without the mic attached because the new iPhone, I don't think you need it. And so welcome, gentlemen. You don't look small. You look good.
Well, we're just big guys.
I'm giant. You're not like, you can't even get my shoulder in. I'm so giant.
I feel like I'm shorter than you guys.
I'm just sitting up. I'm trying to get the chins out.
I'd like to give a little history on Mr. Siegel's
please
relationship with me.
Okay, please do.
First of all, I'm on the board for several organizations. One of them is called the Foundation for Life Ministry. And what we do is we literally take men off the streets and provide them a place to live, okay? And what it is, this is a spiritual and a 12-step based, it's a Christian base and a 12-step based program. And, it's organizations like that work for the community because, as we all know, government can't do everything, and private organizations, the private sector, is fantastic for helping people. Right. Okay, also, there is an epidemic and there's different outlets which I'll provide you with the phone numbers, like Carol Burkett, which told me to tell you hello, Mr. Siegel.
See, this is the great organic part. We're just having a conversation.
That she is in charge of the Coalition for a Drug-Free Community. One of my board members on the foundation calls her the drug czar for Orange County, right? But we're going to provide you with their phone number for information. They're doing great works, okay? And also, if you are curious about being evaluated for what's the proper treatment, I'm on the board for Turning Point of Orlando, which is a nonprofit, and so it's not all about the money.
Right.
And their phone number is 407-422-HELP. And of course,
which we'll share. I promise we're going to share all of this later.
This will bring me to Mr. Siegel. I brought him into the Orange County Jail with me because
as a visitor.
Well, they let us out.
Just want to clarify that, just in case it gets picked up anywhere.
For a while.
And they were very honored to have him there because I've been going there for nearly the last 7 years, talked to over 12,000 inmates. I take a 12-step ministry. I mean, a 12-step, I hate to call it a ministry, but a 12-step program which I happen to be a member of. And to show Mr. Siegel, because what he's doing is fantastic as far as saving lives. And I'm going to let him tell the story, but one of the inmates stood up and thanked him, and I'll let him tell that. Remember when that inmate stood
David,
up?
Pete's actually going to let you talk, so here you go.
Besides all that Pete's doing, he's running for County Commission District 3 and running a business on top of that. I don't know where you find all the hours in the day. But
that's right.
Back to the community.
Back to the community. That's what we all do, right?
Yes.
Makes me feel like I'm slacking.
I doubt anybody would ever associate the word slacking with you on any level. So that's very humble of you.
Anyway.
So talk. So I don't know if everybody's got to know David Siegel, but give them a little background. And I like to give my audience enough credit that they read the bio, but let's assume that they did not. So give them a little background on you.
I've been here for 50 years. Came with no money and probably will leave with no money.
I don't believe that.
But my wife will be very wealthy.
Awesome.
I thought you were going to say, I spent it all.
You spend it.
Everything.
Allegedly.
I've been very successful building up a large company. We're the leaders in the timeshare industry. And everything is dwarfed by what I'm doing now, and that is trying to save lives due to the drug epidemic. And people don't realize it, but America is under attack. And it's not North Korea, it's not Russia, it's not ISIS, it's the drug epidemic. And 2 years ago, over 45,000 people died from a drug overdose. Last year was over 65,000.
Wow.
This year it'll probably be 80 or 90,000. And those are the ones that are reported.
Right.
Story came out recently that most medical examiners have so many overdose deaths that they can't even do the blood test.
What
determine
causes the
what the people
increase?
died.
What's caused the increase from 45 to
it's
80 or 60?
Most of the problem now of the overdoses is due to fentanyl. Fentanyl is added to heroin. It's 50 times stronger than heroin, and a few grains of fentanyl will kill somebody. And
That's what killed Michael Jackson, right? And that's also, they just released
Michael
Prince's
Jackson, yeah.
toxology, right? And that was
Prince
in there.
they just came out, and Prince died from fentanyl, but he had 10 times the lethal dose in him. I mean, it was unbelievable. But people aren't aware of just how bad fentanyl is. There's a carfentanil, which is a form of fentanyl that's 100 times stronger than fentanyl, that actually is used for elephant tranquilizer.
Jeez.
So can you imagine a few grains will put down an elephant? Can you imagine what it would do to
It's
a human?
unbelievable. And wasn't it originally, it's like a sleeping, it's a drug to help people sleep or put people
No,
in?
it was for pain. It was
Oh, it is for pain.
It was developed to fight pain. And the hospitals still use it, but I mean, they know how to use what dose to use
Right.
versus.
Right.
You know, there's an antidote against fentanyl and against heroin and against prescription drugs called naloxone. And it's been out for 47 years, and nobody knows about it. It's FDA approved, 100% safe, and someone could be laying on the ground, turning blue, one breath from death, and you give them naloxone, and within 2 to 5 minutes they'll be telling you what they took. So unfortunately, it should be in every medicine cabinet. Every drug dealer, every drug user should have access to it. Every drug addict should have it in their pocket, just like people carry EpiPens or.
How does it work? What's the science behind it?
The most popular form now is called Narcan nasal spray, and it's actually, I carry it to show people. This is what Narcan nasal spray looks like, and if somebody is overdosed, the police officer finds them, they put this in their nose, and they push the little plunger, gives them a dose of it, and within, like I said, 2 to 5 minutes. But if they have fentanyl in their system, then it takes sometimes 3 or 4 of these. But the police are only carrying one, so if the people have overdosed from fentanyl, they're like, it helps a little bit, but they're like helpless until paramedics come. So.
Why do you think the crisis has gotten so bad? Is it because we overprescribe, the availability is just increased, or what's causing that to just shift, or to have shifted?
It all starts when the kids are 14, 15 years old, and they start experimenting with marijuana. And from that, they end up overdosing on heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, Oxycontin, all the other, but they all start at 14, 15 when they're in middle school using marijuana. And the only way to stop it, we have 25 million drug addicts in the pipeline
That's
today.
what you were telling me. Tell them this
25
stat.
million.
This is insane.
And there's another 25 million in recovery. If you haven't used drugs in 5 years, you're considered in recovery.
Right.
So this goes to show that it takes 5 years to really prove that you're not a drug addict.
Correct.
And statistically, right now, the baby boomers, my generation, and even the soccer moms are getting addicted to opioids through being prescribed medication through the doctors. And that's even like my wife mentioned when they closed the pill mills years ago. It was a no-brainer. The heroin epidemic's going to go through the roof. And as Mr. Siegel mentioned, it's the fentanyl is so powerful that they're dropping like flies. I have families that reach out to me for help, and that's what kind of gets me, because whenever an addict has a moment of clarity, trying to get them that help is very important.
Sure.
In Rhode Island and other areas you've seen on the news, you can literally take an addict to the police department and they won't bust them, you know, with their drugs or whatever. They will get them the help they need. In Orange County, I would love, I mean, supposedly we have this, but I've been in the trenches trying to help young people get clean, and whenever the moment of clarity comes, and getting them into the facility, because you gotta get that, what we call the moment of clarity,
Sure.
and get them the help they need right away. And that's something that me and Mr. Siegel have been discussing, working on, trying to make that happen amongst the other great things that he is already doing.
So educate them on opioid, because they hear it, it's in the news, that's the word, that's how it describes it. But what's an example of an opioid? What pill is it that they're taking? What are they being prescribed, and what for? So people can hear the common name of it.
Drugs like Percocet, like Xanax, Adderall. These are all opioids.
Those are all
Oxy-
opioids. Okay.
Cotton. There's numerous drugs. Heroin is considered an opioid.
But the other ones are legal technically, right?
They're
if they're
legal,
prescribed.
but doctors don't know how to prescribe.
Right.
They get 4 hours of prescription training in med school, total of 4 hours.
Wow.
So they come out, they really don't know how to prescribe, so guess who teaches them? The drug company's reps. You've been to doctor's offices, you see this cute little girl in her miniskirt comes in with her sample case, and she tells the doctors, if you have somebody with a migraine, this is what you give them.
Right.
If you have somebody with a backache, this is what you give them. And by the way, if you prescribe enough of them, we'll even send you on a free vacation to Hawaii.
Right, there's actually an incentive for
Right.
the prescriptions.
And we'll also give you free samples. You can give people, get them started. And oh, by the way, if you give somebody a 30-day prescription and tell them to come back in 30 days and you'll see how they're doing, you got a repeat visitor. But what they don't tell them is 30 days on a opioid, they'll be addicted at the end of 30 days.
Wow.
And even like I went to a dentist and let him know I'm a recovering person, and he prescribed Vicodin, and I had to not accept the prescription. As
Right.
a recovering person, we have to really take care of ourselves.
People think that if a doctor says it's okay, number one, that it's okay to take the prescription, and usually doctors say, and even though you feel better, keep taking it,
Right.
which is a big fallacy. But they also say, well, if the doctor prescribed it, it must be safe. But these things are not safe, and sometimes people take. They say, well, if one's good for me, I'll take two. That'll be even better.
Right. So how do
The
you...
first time you take like a Vicodin, you have a 6% chance of becoming addicted. If you take it 3 days in a row, you have a 16% chance, and so on.
Wow.
Yes.
And a lot of times the Tylenol and Advil work just as good as that. But people get the 30-day supply of an opioid, Vicodin, Percocet, things like that. And they use 3 or 4, they feel good, and the remaining 27 pills are in their medicine cabinet where kids can get a hold of them. And the medicine cabinet is the biggest drug dealer that we have. Now we're having a problem with open houses where people are trying to sell their houses, and people are going there not to buy a house, but just to go to the medicine cabinet because the owners
Oh my God, I
using
never
that
thought
and
about that.
An addict mind.
and they're stealing the prescriptions right out of their medicine cabinet.
Wow.
So I mean, this has gotten to be such a problem. You know, I like to tell people we're losing our future generation. We're losing our future Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and people like that. We're losing. We could be losing the cure for cancer.
Right.
We're losing movies we'll never see and books we'll never read and music we'll never hear. It's our future generation, and it's not getting better, it's getting worse. In Orange County this year so far, they're up 60% in overdoses over last 60% over last year. Fortunately, they're saving because I got all the police officers and deputy sheriffs and even UCF police carrying this Narcan nasal spray, and fortunately they're saving most of the people who are overdosing, but still there's a lot of them are.
So will you share with them, if you're okay with it, because I think a lot of people don't know the story. There's obviously a reason, there's always a reason why. Can you share whatever you're comfortable with about why this has become important to you?
Well, 3 years ago, I lost my beautiful 18-year-old daughter to a drug overdose. And she was a mixed up child, and so we sent her to a psychiatrist, and immediately he put her on Xanax. And she came home and I said, what happened? She said, oh, he talked to me and he put me on Xanax. And I thought Xanax was like Advil. I had no idea. I was so naive about drugs. I've never used a drug. I never even saw a marijuana cigarette in my life, and up until 3 years ago. And when she passed away, I could have crawled into bed and become a basket case, but instead I decided I was going to do something about this. And for the last three, I called all my executives together and I said, guys, from now on you're going to be running the company. I'm going to make my life's mission to end this drug epidemic. And I've traveled the country. I have visited numerous rehabs all over the country, Betty Ford, Hazleton, River. I mean, I could just name dozens of them. I've gone to jail with Pete Crotty and talked to convicts. And I want to tell you, there were about 100 convicts wearing their orange jumpsuits, and they were all in there for drug offenses. And I said, how many of you started experimenting with marijuana when you were 14, 15? Every hand went up. And one of the convicts said, Mr. Siegel, I want to thank you. And I'm wondering, why are you thanking me? He said, you saved my life. I said, what did I do? He said, well, the police officer that found me when I overdosed and brought me back to life with Narcan said if it wasn't for you, he wouldn't have been carrying it.
Wow.
So I was part of the heroin task force, Orange County Heroin Task Force. And when I the first meeting I attended, out of about 25 people on the task force, I think only a couple knew what naloxone was. And I kept urging them that they needed to carry it. I brought representatives in from the company that makes it. And by the time, after about 5 or 6 weeks, I got the police officers and I got the sheriff's department and the university police all carrying it, and they're saving lives every day.
I didn't know about it until I heard you speak at Tiger Bay.
Okay.
I had not heard about Narcan and didn't even understand what it was. So when I showed up and I understood why you were talking about opioids, I understood the thought process, but I had absolutely no idea there was even anything on the market.
Nobody knows. I made a speech at Liberty University about a year ago, maybe now it's probably 2 years ago, and 15,000 people in the audience. And I asked at the end of my speech, how many of you know what naloxone was? One hand went up, and I don't even know if he thought I was talking about a food or whatever.
Right.
But it's a well-kept secret, and yet it's a difference between life and death. The 65,000 people that died last year from a drug overdose, every one of them, every single one could have been saved if they had known about naloxone.
Right.
like I said, it's common name is Narcan.
Right.
Nasal spray. That's what the police are carrying. We got a law passed in Congress 2 years ago that provides money for every policeman in the country to carry it.
Wow.
And yet a lot of the police agencies either don't want to or don't even know that there's money available to pay for it.
So if why would they not want to? Is there some negative that I'm not understanding? What would be the reason why?
Oh my God, they have all kinds of reasons. You know, one of the reasons is like the governor of Maine said, I don't want police dispensing Narcan because well, if we save their life, they're just going to overdose again. To me, where there's life, there's hope. But
Right.
that was their attitude. Just if they overdose, they're just going to do it again. A lot
We've
of
heard
them.
that a lot too.
I would
You know,
imagine you've heard that a lot.
The Orange County Sheriff's Department said, "Listen, we carry enough stuff. Their excuse at the beginning was we don't want to carry anything else." Recently, a deputy sheriff came to me and he said, "Mr. Siegel, if I had to leave one thing home, I would leave my gun home before I would leave my Narcan because my
Wow.
Narcan will save more lives than my gun will."
That's powerful.
And so now when before when a police officer found somebody laying on the ground turning blue from an overdose, they would call 911
Right.
and the paramedics would come out. About 15-20 minutes later, the person was dead.
Right.
Now they feel empowered. They can now give them, and they call it the Lazarus drug. It brings people back from the dead. They give it to people that they barely have a pulse, and 2 to 5 minutes later, they're sitting up telling what they do.
That's amazing.
They have to go to the hospital. They have 90 minutes to go to the hospital, and get on a detoxed and on an IV. But it saves lives.
Due to Mr. Siegel's good efforts, for instance, a couple months ago, I went to the Holden Heights Community Center because they had like 19 ODs in the last couple months.
Wow.
And again, the Coalition for a Drug-Free Community and another agency, private agency, provided Narcan. I actually have 2 doses now in my possession because they're educating the public and they want to just make sure that they know how to use it and make awareness. And that's why we agreed to come on your show today, because we want everybody to know that, you know, lives can be saved and there truly is help available in the community, but we have great things that we need to continue to do to work on this
Agreed.
epidemic because it totally is out of control.
So David and I were talking before the show about how insurance only pays for, so the life is saved, and I agree with you. Bring them back, there's hope in life, so I love that. So you bring them back, and the problem with traditional treatment is most insurance carriers will only pay for 30 days, and most people need much more time in order for it to be impactful.
It takes 90 days minimum to get over an addiction. Depends on how strong the addiction is, but a minimum of 90 days. The insurance companies only pay for 30 days. So what happens? People, parents get their kids into rehab. It's about $1,000 a day, $30,000 for a month. That's all the insurance will pay. They go in, they get detoxed, they get counseling, and then they're kicked out when the money runs out.
Right.
And they're the most vulnerable of any time when that happens because they've been detoxed. They're not cured, so they come out, they fall off the wagon, they go back to the same dosage they were taking when they went in, and their body's been detoxed, they can't handle that, and more people overdose and die after rehab than any other time. So you're better off not to send them to rehab if you're not going to be there at least for 90 days. We don't have enough rehab facilities. Some of them are less than reputable, but even the ones that do,
I call them grant grabbers.
well,
Grant grabbers.
Grant grabbers. There's a lot of those out there.
Well, it used to be, my master's degree is in health services administration, so I worked for District 7, and we did the licensing and the funding for all of the alcohol and drug abuse and mental health facilities in the Tri-County area. The biggest challenge for that was the recidivism rate, which it seems like it's still is up there. We would put them in, but it wasn't enough time, there wasn't enough funding, and so you couldn't keep them in for very long. So the programs were built around basically a failure rate, and then they knew it was a revolving door. They would keep coming back and keep seeing the same people over and over again. And once you go back to wherever you're at, if you haven't resolved the problem, and it's very difficult to do that in 30 days, impossible, then you're just going to be a revolving door and go back into treatment.
Well, that's like when I go to the jail and I see the revolving door and I see an inmate come back. I tell them, I am really glad to see you here, because the thing is that they survived their addiction.
Correct.
See, we want to call it a burglary, but truly it's addiction. That's what's causing a lot of the problems. And like Mr. Siegel just mentioned, the 90 days is very important. That's why in the 12-step that I'm involved in, the 12-step program, I'm a firm believer in that we recommend you go to 90 meetings in 90 days so people get to know you and see if you're acting different.
That's the same program that Betty Ford uses.
And I'm actually alumni of Hazleton in Minnesota.
Same program
that you spoke at.
That Alcohol Anonymous uses as well.
Correct.
It's a good program, but
so what do we do? How do we get the insurance carriers to do better with that? How do we get people in the treatment and keep them there for longer?
We have to get the legislature to do their job. Yes. The biggest problem we have, there's no sense of urgency. There's no knowledge of what's going on.
Well, yeah, because people just hear it in the news, but everybody's so desensitized.
I'll give you an example. A couple weeks ago, 17 people were killed at Parkland School in South Florida. It's been all over the news. They've organized marches on the White House.
They've done.
17 people. The same day, 170 people died from an overdose. You didn't hear a word about it.
Because we're reactionary in our country. Well, in most countries.
We need marches like that for the drug epidemic.
Truly.
I mean, it's in Washington. There's no sense of urgency. Everyone talks a little bit about it, but they don't do anything.
Yeah, because you hear it in the news. There was something about the president signing something, but people are we have no attention span, so it's on to the next. And if you haven't been impacted, you don't feel it.
They're all kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
And there's no direct action. I applaud Governor Scott for coming out with signing some bills, but it's like too little too late.
Right.
You know, he's limiting the amount of dosage that doctors can give and dentists can prescribe and all. But we need to, I'm telling you, we're never going to end this if we don't start drug testing in middle schools, because the fear of getting caught will keep kids from starting.
Because peer pressure is very big still then.
It's the greatest defense against peer pressure. When their friend says, hey, be cool like me, smoke a joint with me, they can say, hey, I'm as cool as you are, but I'm afraid I'll get caught.
Right.
Now, I'm not talking about punitive, I'm not talking about kicking kids out of school. I'm talking about keeping them from starting. If they started, getting them to stop. If they're addicted, get them treatment, get them counseling, not to ruin their life.
Right.
But to get them help.
I love that, because the punitive early, it can be such a negative and have such an impact for the rest of their lives.
The best thing that a parent could do takes tough love. Best thing would be drug test. When your kids get to be 14, 15 and up, drug test them. And they'll look you right in the eye and say, oh, I would never use drugs.
They're good at that, aren't they?
And half of them will be using drugs.
Yeah.
But, we passed the medical marijuana law, which I think is the beginning of the end, because next year they'll be asking for recreational marijuana. Every state that started with medical marijuana has now got recreational marijuana. And, people say, well, there's nothing wrong with marijuana. I will tell you this, it won't kill you, but it retards your brain. You lose, and Harvard did a study on it, you lose 10 points off your IQ. You're less productive during your life. Your life expectancy is lower. Because of drugs, the United States is the only large country that the life expectancy has gone down instead of up. Or all other.
Oh, is that attributable to
industrial
drugs?
products.
That's
all
fascinating.
Has to do with the
That's
with the
fascinating.
drugs. And
Mary says a
there's
lot of her
nothing-
former clients started using their
if
parents'
somebody
alcohol and drugs.
and if somebody just stayed on marijuana and never graduated, but what happens is, like everything else, why are people using marijuana? To get high. After a while, they get, just like you took your first drink of alcohol and you've got a buzz. After a while, you could drink 10 drinks and not get a buzz. Well, the same thing with marijuana. After a while, they don't get that high. So
Right.
now they want to go to something stronger, and they want to go to like cocaine or prescription drugs or heroin. So cheap now. You can get a hit of heroin for a couple $dollars on the street, and so they're going to heroin. Heroin's 10 times stronger now than it was 10 years
I can't
ago.
believe heroin's made a
And
comeback.
now heroin, they even get used, believe it or not, they even get used to heroin. So what do? They look for a drug dealer that's got something stronger. So that's
Right.
when the drug dealers start adding fentanyl to it.
That's what somebody said earlier. It might have been Kenneth Draper said they add the death drug to it, which obviously he's talking about
which
fentanyl,
is
something
fentanyl.
that's... All right, so we're going to share all of David's contact information. We're going to share all of Pete's contact information, phone numbers, where you can get help, where you can access the information that they are desperately trying to get out there. It's so important. You hear about it all the time. Do your research, because it is an epidemic and people are literally not listening to how much of an impact it's having on our country. And you're right. We're going to miss out on the next brilliant scientist, the cure for cancer, the artist, the musician, because so many people are dying of it. What was the daily
170 that we
170.
know about. I would say it's well over 200, because a lot of people they have a child that dies from a drug overdose and they'll say it was pneumonia, or they'll say it was cancer or heart attack, because the stigma,
Right.
saying, oh, my child died from a drug overdose, it's like a failure,
Correct.
Whereas,
Correct.
but the numbers are staggering. They're a lot higher than what are reported.
Right.
But people can start, like I said, drug testing their own children in their own homes. Schools, if they had any guts, would start drug testing their students. Now, let me give you an example. In Orange County, there are 5 private schools, large private schools in Orange County. They all drug test their students. They all brag that they're drug-free. In the public schools, you can walk down any hallway in any public school and buy any drug that you want. And why should the people who can afford private schools, why should their kids not be druggies, whereas the people in public schools, their children,
Correct.
are have to be associated with this? And it's up to the parents.
I agree.
It's up to the community. It's up to the government.
We need to
do something about it. I mean, this is not terminal cancer.
Right.
This is not incurable. This can be ended.
Right, we can actually make an impact.
But where's the marches? Where's the outcry?
Well, that's what you're creating. You're creating this movement, this initiative with what you're doing, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I appreciate you sharing the story about your daughter and your why.
Can you imagine if a jetliner crashed with 170 people on board every day?
Right.
That's what's happening. People have to realize this is.
Well, it's perspective again. You just put that in a relatable term to them.
I mean,
people again have become so desensitized.
If North Korea bombed one of our ships and killed 170 sailors, we'd be at war.
Correct.
And yet we're losing that many every day.
We're at war. We're just not doing anything about it.
You don't hear a whimper.
That's right.
And that's what's frustrating. And I'm doing the best I can.
You're doing I think you're doing an amazing
I've only
job.
touched on the tip of the
Yes.
iceberg here, but.
And we want to thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
On the awareness. I'm sitting there looking at your comments.
Tons of comments.
I'm seeing people that I know that have lost their child or that are in recovery.
And I appreciate you all sharing everything, and we'll respond to you because I think it's very important to continue to engage.
I will tell you that the best way to console yourself when you lose a child is do something about it.
Right.
Don't be a basket case, but get out there, whatever you can do. every life you save is like your child's legacy.
Amen.
You know, I figured I've saved over 500 lives.
I believe
and
it.
counting.
And
And I've just started.
as me getting my 17-year.
I know. So congratulate Pete. Next week is
Pete.
17 years clean
Right.
and sober.
And you got to give it back.
That is absolutely an amazing feat and absolutely wonderful.
I've known Pete for a long time. He'll make an excellent county commissioner.
Thank you.
Please get out there and vote for him. Donate money to his campaign. Like every campaign, they're looking for money. But he's been a big help. What he does behind the scenes, he doesn't do it for fanfare. People don't realize all the good that you're doing in the community. I was with you, and I know that you had to take a night away from your family to go to every month to go to the jails. And
Once a week.
is it once a week?
Wow.
It's even 4 times better than I thought it was.
Oh, yes, sir.
And so
I think it's amazing what both of you are doing. I'm so happy that you are on the show. I'm so happy for all of your comments and that you all shared your story with us. And I promise you that we'll reach out to you.
If this saves one life,
Yes.
it was worth it 100 times over.
Agreed.
Yes.
And I'm thankful that you both came today. Thank you so much.
Thank
we
you, sir.
love you guys. Thank you so much for engaging. And I promise that we're going to respond to all of your messages. It's been a very interactive show. All of that going on there.
Oh, really?
That's people who are commenting and
Wow.
messages to you and to Pete and to me.
Oh, we'll try to
so
answer.
we will answer all of those. We
We'll
love
try
you
to
guys.
answer.
Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
having us,
having us.
Ted.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr.